Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, well, a truly massive project. A figure just so colossal, filled with this incredible revolutionary ambition and, frankly, sheer genius.
Yeah, someone who completely reshaped Europe.
Exactly. His story just fundamentally rewrote the map. We're tracking the epic rise and the dramatic, almost tragic fall of Napoleon Bonaparte.
And this is one of those deep dives where the source material itself, it just feels cinematic, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like a high drama epic. Our sources, they really dig into Napoleon's path, starting from his, pretty obscure beginnings on Corsica.
An outsider, really.
Totally. All the way through the absolute peak of his European empire, and then finally down to that lonely exile.
So our mission today, yours and mine, is to get beyond just the famous quotes you always hear or the basic battle summaries.
Right.
We want to distill the actual mechanics of his power, look at the core strategies, maybe some of the unexpected political moves he made.
And those turning points. Crucially, the moments, both emotional and strategic, that made him seem unstoppable, but also maybe set him up for that eventual fall.
Yeah, how did this one guy, this relatively small artillery officer, manage to shake every single monarch, every institution in the Western world? Kind of mind-boggling.
It really is. It's like historical forces meeting this incredible individual will. And the sources frame his life as this, like you said, almost mythic, tragic story, perfectly summed up by that line they use. Napoleon was born in obscurity, crowned in glory, exiled in sorrow.
That nails it.
So we're going to spend the next bit of time really unpacking the key moments that sort of made that fate seem, well, inevitable.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this, starting right where the legend begins, which is Section 1, the Corsican Fire. From outsider to military prodigy, 1769-1796.
Right. And the sources, they immediately hammer home this idea of him being an outsider. It wasn't just about geography, being from Corsica. It went deeper psychologically. He was born late summer 1769. Corsica itself had only just become French like a year before he was born.
Wow, the timing, that's critical.
It really is. So technically he's a French citizen, but just barely. And he's growing up on this island where you can still hear the echoes of rebellion against France.
Right. And his family, the Bonaparte, noble, but not wealthy at all.
No, noble in name, but really quite poor. The sources say they had this sense of pride, but, quote, little else, living under the shadow of occupation, as they put it.
So that environment, that friction, must have shaped him from the start.
Absolutely. He's constantly hearing whispers about freedom, about fighting back. And what's really interesting is how this isolation, maybe the poverty too, forged his character. People described him back then as, small, quiet, but really intense.
And not out playing with other kids much.
Apparently not. He was indoors, reading. And the sources keep pointing to two figures he was obsessed with, Caesar and Alexander the Great.
The classics.
But here's the key thing the sources emphasize. He wasn't just reading them for history class. He read their stories, quote, not as history, but as prophecy.
Wow. So he's seeing his own future in these ancient conquerors, like from age 10.
That's the idea. It's like he was mapping out his own ambition from day one.
Okay, so that's the foundation. But then reality hits hard when he gets sent to France for school.
Yeah, military school at age 9. And it wasn't just moving house. He was entering a world that saw him as completely foreign, an alien almost.
And it sounds like it was brutal.
Oh, yeah. The sources describe this period of just sustained, deep humiliation. He was apparently mocked constantly.
For what specifically?
His thick Corsican accent, his clothes weren't fancy enough, his roots. The French aristocratic kids saw him as this, country bumpkin.
Ouch.
And he became painfully aware, acutely aware of being this poor outsider.
And that kind of experience, it either breaks you or it makes you.
Yeah. Exactly. And the sources argue it forged something inside him, a fire, this silent vow he apparently took to make them not just accept him, but remember his name.
That makes sense. That deep resentment, that need for validation, turning into this almost world-changing ambition.
It's powerful stuff, like a revenge story playing out on the world stage.
So he picks the artillery. Why artillery specifically? Is there a reason behind that choice?
Yeah, that's a key detail. Artillery back then was seen as the more meritocratic branch of the army.
Meaning?
Well, in the infantry or cavalry, getting promoted often relied heavily on your family name, your title, your wealth. Artillery needed brains. It required math, precision, actual skill you could demonstrate.
Ah, so it was a path where pure talent, not just your connections, could actually get you noticed.
Exactly. A place for an outsider with genius to potentially rise.
And lucky for him, I guess, France itself was basically exploding at the time.
Right, the revolution just turns everything upside down. The old rules, the old social order, it's shattering. Kings are literally losing their heads.
And Napoleon sees this chaos not as danger, but as
opportunity, with a capital O.
He sees the upheaval as the perfect chance for someone like him. So he's positioned perfectly. An army officer, fiercely loyal to the revolution, anti-monarchy, and brilliant.
And trained. He has the skills.
Which brings us to his first big moment in the spotlight, the thing that gets Paris talking. Toulon, 1793.
Yes, the Siege of Toulon. France was actually losing badly there. Royalist rebels, backed by the British Navy in the harbor. It looked grim.
And Napoleon's just a captain.
A young artillery captain, yeah, only 24. But he immediately sees what the older, more established generals are missing. He figures out the crucial strategic point.
Which was?
A specific high ground position. He realized if they could get cannons up there, they could fire directly down into the harbor and basically force the British fleet to leave.
Simple, but effective.
Deceptively simple. And he didn't just suggest it, he was apparently right there directing the placement of the guns under fire. Showed real bravery.
So he wasn't just a strategist, he led from the front.
He did, and his plan worked spectacularly. Turned a likely defeat into a huge victory. The British had to pull out.
And that's when people start noticing him. The ridicule stops.
Pretty much overnight. Suddenly, Paris is buzzing about this young officer. They start calling him the little corporal, you know, small in stature, but with this giant tactical mind and will.
And while all this is happening, the revolution in Paris is just churning through leaders, right? The terror, the directory, it's chaos.
Utter chaos. Leaders rising and falling, ending up at the guillotine. The Directory was notoriously corrupt, paranoid, dangerous time.
But Napoleon survives and rises. Was it just the military wins?
That was part of it, but the sources stress he was also becoming a very sharp political player.
Okay, tell me more about that.
He apparently studied the politics of the situation coldly precise, like a battle. He figured out how to navigate the treacherous waters of the Directory.
So calculating.
Very. He learned when to push, when to hold back, who to align with, maybe who to discard. It was the same kind of precision he used with his cannons.
That combination, the military brilliance and this political shrewdness, earns him his first really big command in 1796, the Army of Italy.
Yes, but famously, this wasn't exactly a top-tier assignment initially.
No? Why not?
It might have been a test, or maybe even the Directory trying to sideline him because they were already a bit nervous about his ambition.
So they gave him the difficult command.
Extremely difficult. The Army of Italy was described as a hungry, ragged force, outnumbered, underpaid, and poorly supplied. Morale was rock bottom.
Which, of course, sets the scene for one of his most legendary moments of leadership, that speech.
Oh, yeah. Before the campaign kicks off, he gives this incredible address to the troops. He taps right into their desperation, but also their ambition.
What did he say again? The sources quote it, right?
They do, vividly. You can almost picture him there. Soldiers, he says, you are hungry and naked. The government owes you much, but can give you nothing.
Brutally honest.
But then the pivot. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. Rich provinces and great cities will be in your power.
And
there you will find honor, glory, and riches.
Wow. It's pure genius because it's so direct. It's not about abstract ideals. It's about food, clothes, money, and fame.
Exactly. He's promising them tangible reward. And crucially, he delivers. He delivers through these revolutionary new military tactics.
Okay, this is where we need to get into the nuts and bolts. What made his army suddenly so effective? It wasn't just the speech, right?
No, not at all. It was organization, speed, and a new system. He introduced what's known as the core system.
The core system.
Okay.
Break that down for us. What was it and why was it such a game changer?
All right, so before Napoleon, armies tended to move as one enormous, slow-moving blob. Think of a giant blob on the map. Very centralized, very dependent on these long, vulnerable supply lines.
Right, easy to predict, easy to target the supplies.
Exactly. Napoleon's idea was to break his large army down into smaller, self-contained, combined arms. These were think of them as mini armies.
How big?
Usually around 20,000 to 30,000 men. Each had its own infantry, cavalry, artillery, engineers, even its own command staff under one of his marshals. They could operate independently for a while.
So instead of one big, slow blob, he has several faster, nimbler mini blobs.
Precisely. These corps could march dispersed, using different roads, which meant they could cover ground much, much faster. They could live off the land more easily in smaller groups.
But they could still fight together.
That was the genius. They marched separately, but always within supporting distance, maybe a day's march of each other. So when it was time for battle, Napoleon could order them to converge rapidly on a single...
So speed and concentration. Catch the enemy off guard.
Totally. The enemy might see one corps approaching and think they have manageable odds. Then suddenly 2 or 3 more corps appear seemingly out of nowhere. It allowed him to achieve local superiority even if he was outnumbered overall.
And this is what he unleashes on Italy.
Yeah, the sources describe him using this system to just crush the combined armies of Austria and Sardinia, lightning speed, conquering northern Italy in about a year.
And we see those famous battles, Arcole, Lodi, Rivoli. They're all examples of this new style.
Absolutely. Fast, decisive, often catching the enemy off balance. He completely transformed that ragged, demoralized army into this incredibly efficient, well-fed, wealthy fighting force.
And loyal to him, personally.
Critically loyal to him. He delivered on his promise of glory.
So by the time he comes back to Paris, he's only 27.
Just 27. And he returns as this conquering hero, celebrated everywhere, adored by the public, but also, feared by the politicians and the directors.
Right, they created a potential monster.
They certainly recognized the scale of his ambition.
And this is that key moment, that transition. He's achieved more than most generals do in a lifetime, but the sources say he wasn't satisfied.
Not even close. That ambition, it had shifted. It wasn't just about getting noticed or winning battles anymore. He was starting to think bigger. Empire. The sources describe it as a hunger that never fades. He'd tasted real power, and now he wanted more. The calculations became less military, more political destiny.
Which takes us straight into Section 2. Emperor of Fire. Zenith, Legacy, and Fatal Mistake, 1798.
And the first, maybe slightly weird step on this path is Egypt, 1798.
Yeah, the Egyptian campaign. Definitely a strange one on the surface, but it was actually a very calculated political move by the Directory, that is.
How so?
By 98, Napoleon was, as the sources say, the brightest star in France and the most dangerous. The politicians in the Directory were genuinely scared of his popularity and ambition.
So sending him to Egypt was a way to get rid of him?
Pretty much. Get him thousands of miles away, give him a grand conquest, disrupting British trade routes to India, maybe find glory, but also hope he gets, bogged down or even fails. Out of sight, out of mind.
But Napoleon sees it differently. He's not thinking about getting sidelined. No way. He's thinking legacy. He's chasing Caesar. He's chasing Alexander, establishing a French presence in East, maybe carving out his own Eastern Empire. Immortality, basically.
And it was definitely dramatic, the Battle of the Pyramids.
Oh, yeah. Facing the Mamluks, these elite cavalry warriors, his own troops are hot, tired, probably wondering what they're doing there. And he gives them that line.
The famous
Soldiers, from the top of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you.
It's just pure theater, isn't it? But effective. Connecting their struggle to all the human history.
Exactly. He understood that soldiers fight for more than just orders or pay. They fight for glory, for spectacle, for being part of something huge.
They win the battle, but the whole campaign kind of hits a wall, doesn't it? Because of the British Navy.
Yeah, this is where Napoleon's big weakness gets exposed. Sea power. While he's winning on land, exploring tombs, Admiral Nelson finds the French fleet anchored at Aboukir Bay.
The Battle of the Nile.
And just annihilate. Destroys the ships, strands Napoleon and his army in Egypt.
Cuts them off completely.
Makes the whole conquest strategically impossible in the long run. He won the battles, but Nelson won the campaign, really. A huge logistical and naval failure for France.
But Napoleon being Napoleon, he doesn't see it as defeat.
Never. The sources say he was never defeated in his own head. He sees the writing on the wall for the campaign, hears about the political chaos back in France.
And he slips away.
Leaves his army behind, which was controversial, and sails back secretly to France in 1799. Finds the country is a mess, the Directory is corrupt, losing wars, people are sick of the instability.
The perfect vacuum for him to step into.
And he doesn't waste a second. He sees his chance and executes the coup d'etat in November 1799. Brumaire, it's called.
Let's pause here, because this coup, it wasn't just a blunt takeover, was it? There was subtlety in it.
Absolutely. The sources describe it as having the speed of a general and the precision of a chessman. He gets rid of the Directory, but he replaces it with the consul.
The consul sounds less dictatorial.
That was the point. On paper, it was a 3-man executive body, 3 consuls sharing power.
But that was just for show.
Pretty much a fig leaf, yeah. The sources detail how Napoleon immediately outmaneuvered the other 2 and got himself named first consul. And the first consul held almost all the real executive power.
Clever. So he keeps the language of the Republic consul, not king, to keep the revolutionary types happy.
While actually grabbing all the power for himself, it was a really smart, calculated move that effectively ended the Republic without declaring it dead.
Okay, so now he's firmly in charge, but he doesn't declare himself emperor right away. There's this period from about 1800 to 1804. What's he doing then?
This is crucial. He knows he can't just grab the crown yet. He needs to be seen as the savior, the restorer of order. So he embarks on this massive program of rebuilding France.
Well, not just military stuff.
Way more. He gets the nation's finances back on track, starts building roads and infrastructure, creates a much more efficient efficient, centralized government administration, and he tackles the thorny issue of religion.
Ah, the church. The revolution had really alienated religious people, right?
Massively. Seized church lands, persecuted priests. It created deep divisions. Napoleon, though probably not very religious himself, was a pragmatist. He knew he needed to heal that rift for stability.
So he makes a deal, the Concordat of 1801.
Exactly. It was a deal with the Pope. It recognized Catholicism as the religion of the majority of Frenchmen. Careful wording brought the church back into public life, but didn't give back the lands seized during the Revolution.
So it pleased the Catholics without upsetting those who'd benefited from the land sales.
A masterful balancing act. It brought a lot of conservatives back on side, calmed things down enormously.
But the big one, the thing that lasts even today, is the legal reform, the Napoleonic Code. The original summary missed this, and it's huge.
Absolutely non-negotiable. If his battles were temporary, the code is arguably immortal. Before him, French law was this unbelievably complex, confusing mess. Different rules in different regions, royal laws, old Roman laws, a total tangle. Total chaos. The code swept all that away. It created one single, unified, systematic body of law for the entire country. Clear, logical, accessible.
What were the core principles? What made it so revolutionary and influential?
Okay, 3 big pillars, really, all rooted in the ideals of the revolution, but now locked into law. First, equality. All male citizens were equal before the law. No more special privileges for nobles or clergy.
Huge.
Second, secularism. The law was based on reason and the state, not religious doctrine. Big break from the past. And third, property rights. Strong protection for private property, which pleased the middle classes and peasants.
And the sources stressed this wasn't just for France, or its influence spread everywhere.
Explosive. As Napoleon's armies conquered Europe, they took the code with them. It was implemented in Italy, the Netherlands, parts of Germany, Spain.
And even after Napoleon was gone.
Many countries kept it or based their new legal systems on it because it was just so much more rational and modern than what they had before. That's why its principles echo in legal systems all over the world today, from Latin America to parts of the Middle East, even Louisiana in the U.S.
Wow. So it's maybe his most lasting achievement. Not a battle, but a law book.
You could absolutely make that argument. It cemented him not just as a general, but as a major legislator, a state builder.
Okay, so he's brought order, restored finances, made peace with the church, given the country this landmark legal code. He's built up enormous goodwill and trust.
He's the man who saved France from chaos. People adored him.
Which finally sets the stage for the ultimate act of self-aggrandizement, the coronation in 1804.
The moment he claims the ultimate prize, and the way he did it, just pure Napoleon.
Notre Dame Cathedral. The Pope himself is there.
Yeah, Pope Pius VII, brought all the way from Rome to legitimize the ceremony, lend it that ancient sacred authority. But then comes the crucial moment, the crown.
He doesn't let the Pope crown him.
No. According to the most famous accounts, just as the Pope is about to place the laurel wreath crown on his head, Napoleon takes it, turns his back to the Pope, and crowns himself.
Wow, the symbolism is just overwhelming.
Totally. He's declaring right there in front of God and everyone that his power comes from himself, from his own achievements, his own will, not from divine right, not from tradition, not from the church.
And then he crowns Josephine Empress.
Yes, and the title he takes is significant too. Emperor of the French, not King of France.
What's the difference?
King of France implies ruling a territory based on inheritance and divine right. Emperor of the French suggests his power comes from the people, a more revolutionary idea, even though he's now an autocrat. It's still nodding to the source of his initial rise, self-made emperor.
Unbelievable. From that poor kid mocked in school to literally crowning himself emperor.
The ultimate outsider becomes the ultimate insider on his own terms.
Naturally, the old monarchies of Europe must have just lost their mind.
Oh, completely. They saw him as this dangerous upstart, the embodiment of the revolution, wearing a crown, threatening the entire established order of hereditary rule.
So they immediately band together to try and crush him. Britain, Austria, Russia, Prussia.
The Third Coalition. They form alliances, mobilize their armies. This is it, they think. We have to stop him now.
And this kicks off the period of his most stunning military victories, right? This absolute peak as a general.
Absolutely. From 1805 to about 1809, he just seemed unbeatable. He takes on these coalitions and dismantles them. The high point, the battle always mentioned, is Austerlitz, 1805.
A masterpiece, the sources call it.
Yeah, his greatest victory. Tell us about the genius there. It wasn't just numbers, was it?
No, not at all. He was actually outnumbered, facing the combined armies of Emperor Francis I of Austria and Tsar Alexander I of Russia. 2 emperors on the field against him.
High stakes.
Huge. But Napoleon used psychology and terrain brilliantly. He deliberately made his right flank look weak, tempting the Allies to attack it.
Like baiting a trap.
Exactly. The Allies took the bait, committing huge forces to crush his supposedly weak right wing, and in doing so, they weakened their own center, stretching their lines over the Pratzen Heights.
And Napoleon was waiting for that.
He had his main force hidden, concealed by thick morning fog, the famous son of Austerlitz, that broke through later. When the moment was right, as the Allied center was vulnerable, he launched a massive assault straight up the heights.
Dashing right through the middle.
Shattered their lines, split the Allied army in two, utter chaos for them. He routed them completely, destroyed two Empire's armies in a single day. The psychological impact was immense.
After that, people must have thought he was genuinely invincible. The sources confirm that feeling. He seemed unstoppable, like a force of nature.
So militarily, he's at the absolute zenith. But even at this peak, the sources start pointing to these underlying problems, these personal and political needs that start to complicate things, specifically the need for an heir.
Yeah, it's that classic problem for any ruler who wants to establish a dynasty. You need a successor. And this ties into his relationship.
His wife, the Empress, he genuinely loved her.
Deeply, by all accounts. The sources really emphasize the passion there. He wrote her incredible letters, partner, his confidant, but
She couldn't give him a child, an heir.
right. And for an emperor building a dynasty, that was a fatal flaw in the relationship, politically speaking. An emperor without a successor, one source says, is just a shadow. His empire could die.
So he faces this brutal choice, his personal happiness with Josephine versus the political necessity of securing his dynasty.
And politics won. He made the agonizing decision to divorce Josephine. The sources talk about him hiding his tears, the genuine heartbreak behind this mask.
A huge personal sacrifice.
Immense. And then, purely for state reasons, he arranges his next marriage.
To Marie-Louise of Austria.
Yes, an archduchess, the daughter of the Austrian emperor, the same emperor he'd just crushed at Austerlitz and other battles.
Wow, talk about marrying your enemy's daughter.
It was pure politics. It gave him a crucial link to one of the oldest, most established royal families in Europe, adding legitimacy. And, critically, she could provide the heir.
Which she did. His son, Napoleon II, the King of Rome.
Born in 1811. So now he has it all, seemingly. The empire, the military dominance, the political alliances through marriage, and the dynastic heir. He's literally redrawn the map of Europe, put his relatives on various thrones.
He should be secure, but the sources argue that this very peak, this pinnacle of power, already contained the seeds of ruin. What do they mean by that?
It comes down to overreach, I think, hubris, the failure to know when to stop. The bigger his empire got, the more spread thin his resources became.
And the more enemies he made.
Exactly. He wasn't just ruling France. He was dominating huge parts of Europe. Spain, Italy, Germany. These weren't willing partners. They were occupied territories, resentful population. Nationalism, the very force the French Revolution had partly unleashed, was now starting to stir against French.
And this leads to another huge strategic blunder, this time an economic one, the continental system.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial and often gets overshadowed by the military campaigns, but it was a massive error with huge consequences.
Okay, so what was the goal? After Austerlitz, Britain is still his main problem, right? But he can't invade them.
No. Nelson's victory at Trafalgar in 1805 made that clear. Britain ruled the waves. Napoleon couldn't beat their navy. So he decided, if I can't invade them, I'll bankrupt them.
Economic warfare.
Precisely. The continental system, declared in 1806, was essentially a giant blockade. Napoleon ordered all countries under his control or allied with him, which was most of continental Europe, to stop trading with Great Britain. No British ships in their ports, no British goods allowed in.
Cut them off entirely. Starve their economy.
That was the plan. Cripple the nation of shopkeepers, as he called them. But it backfired badly.
How so?
Well, first, Britain wasn't crippled. They had global trade, powerful industries, and they found new markets, especially in the Americas. Smuggling also became rampant.
Right. You can't police every coastline.
Exactly. And second, the blockade hurt the European countries more than it hurt Britain. They relied on British manufactured goods, on colonial products like sugar and coffee that came via Britain. Suddenly, those were cut off or became incredibly expensive. Economies suffered, people resented it deeply.
So it created hardship and anger across his own empire.
Massive hardship and anger. And it forced Napoleon to become even more expansionist and controlling just to enforce the system. Portugal refused to comply, so he invaded Portugal. That led to involving Spain.
Which kicked off the Peninsular War, that long, bloody guerrilla war that drained French resources for years.
Exactly. A quagmire born directly from the continental system. It was economic hubris. And the final straw, the thing that leads directly to the biggest disaster, was Russia.
Tsar Alexander I. He initially agreed to the system, didn't he?
He did, after being defeated. But the economic pain for Russia was immense. Their landowners couldn't export timber and grain to Britain. By 1810, 1811, Alexander realizes he just can't sustain. He quietly starts trading with Britain again.
And Napoleon sees this as, what? An economic necessity for Russia.
No. He sees it as a betrayal, a personal insult, a challenge to his authority and the entire structure he's built. He feels he has to make an example of the Tsar.
That wounded pride, combined with the belief he's still invincible,
Leads directly to the single most catastrophic decision of his entire career, the Russian quagmire in 1812.
the invasion of Russia.
He decides he's going to teach Alexander a lesson he'll never forget. He assembles the largest army Europe had ever seen up to that point, the Grande Armée.
How big are we talking?
Over 600,000, maybe even closer to 650,000 by some counts, drawn from France, from all the allied and subject nations. A truly colossal force, a massive logistical challenge just to get them moving.
And he marches them east,
Yeah.
expecting, what? A quick, decisive battle like Austerlitz.
That's exactly what he expected. He wanted the Russians to stand and fight a major battle near their border where he could crush their main army, force the Tsar to the negotiating table, and be home by winter.
But the Russians have other ideas.
Completely different strategy, based on sheer, cold denial and their vast territory.
They refuse to fight him head-on.
They refuse the big battle he craved. Instead, they retreat. They just keep falling back deeper and deeper into Russia. And as they retreat, they practice a scorched earth policy.
Burn everything.
Burning crops, destroying supplies, emptying villages. They leave absolutely nothing for the advancing French army to use. Nothing but act, as the sources say.
And Napoleon's system, his core system, relied on moving fast and living off the land.
Which is exactly what the Russians deny him. The land offers nothing. His supply lines get stretched longer and longer, hundreds of miles back through hostile territory.
So his army starts to disintegrate before they even fight a major battle.
Absolute. Disease, especially typhus, starts to spread. Desertion rates climb. Men and horses are dying from exhaustion and malnutrition long before they even reach Smolensk or Borodino. The speed that was his advantage in Italy now becomes a death trap in the vast Russia.
He does eventually fight a big battle, Borodino.
Yes, just before Moscow. Incredibly bloody, horrific casualties on both sides. Tactically, Napoleon wins in that the Russians retreat again. But it's not the decisive, army-shattering victory he needed. He loses tens of thousands of irreplaceable veteran troops.
And then he marches into Moscow, expecting the Tsar to finally surrender.
He gets to Moscow, the historic capital, thinking, okay, this is it. They have to make peace now. But Moscow is empty.
Empty.
Eerily silent, and then fires start breaking out all over.
Deliberately set.
Almost certainly deliberately set by the retreat. Moscow burns for days. Napoleon finds himself camped in a ruined, burning, empty city with winter approaching.
And the Tsar still doesn't send negotiators.
Silence. Napoleon waits. He waits for weeks, hoping for some diplomatic signal, but nothing comes. The sources are really... He stayed too long. Paralyzed, perhaps, by his own ego, unable to believe the Tsar wouldn't cave.
And while he waits,
The Russian winter arrives. Early and brutal.
the famous General Winter.
The most merciless enemy of all. He finally orders the retreat, but it's far too late.
Describe the retreat. The sources must be horrific.
Unimaginable horror. Temperatures plummeting to -20, -30 degrees Celsius, starvation, frostbite, hypothermia, constant attacks from Russian Cossacks picking off stragglers. The Grande Armée basically ceases to exist as a coherent fighting force. It becomes just this trail of frozen corpses and desperate, stumbling men, ghosts on the frozen road home.
The numbers are just staggering. Of the 600,000 plus who went in,
Maybe 40,000 or 50,000 make it back across the Niemen River in any kind of fighting shape. Some estimates are even lower. It's one of the greatest military disasters in history.
and this is the absolute turning point.
Absolutely definitive. The sources are unanimous. After Russia, Napoleon is no longer Napoleon the Conqueror. He's Napoleon the Survivor. The myth of his invincibility, gone, buried under the snow.
He lost not just men, but experienced veterans, officers, cavalry horses,
Yeah.
the core of his power.
And the aura, the belief that he couldn't be beaten, that was shattered. Europe saw it.
And that catastrophic failure leads us directly into the final act. Section 3, The Fall of the Eagle, Exile and Legacy, 1813-1821.
Yeah, the momentum just completely shifts against him. He gets back to Paris looking, haggard, older. But the damage is done.
A myth is broken.
Totally buried. His empire, which was held together by fear and military dominance, starts to crack. Conquered states see their chance. Allies start to waver, smelling blood in the water.
And the big powers he'd beaten before, Austria, Prussia, Russia, Britain, they see their opportunity for revenge.
They unite again. This time, they're bigger, more determined, and they know he's vulnerable. They put together massive armies, coordinating better than before. It's all aimed at bringing him down, once and for all.
This unified force comes together at Leipzig.
Leipzig, October 1813, known as the Battle of Nations because so many different nationalities were involved. It was the largest battle fought in Europe before World War I.
And Napoleon. He still has fight left in him.
Oh, absolutely. He raises a new army, mostly young conscripts, but he still leaves them with flashes of his old genius. He fights desperately at Leipzig for 3 long days.
But the numbers are just too much.
Way too much. He's outnumbered almost 2-1 by the end. His Saxon allies famously defected mid-battle. He just can't stop the combined weight of the coalition armies. It's a crushing defeat.
A strategic catastrophe.
Yeah.
His army basically disintegrates again.
Yes. He's forced to retreat back towards France. And the sources note this moment, seeing the scale of the disaster at Leipzig, watching his empire crumble. Maybe for the first time since he was that kid in military school, he felt real fear.
His enemies don't let up. They invade France itself.
They push relentlessly from all sides. Napoleon fights a brilliant defensive campaign in France in early 1814, winning several smaller battles, but he just doesn't have the resources to stop them all.
Until Paris falls.
Paris falls in March 1814, and that's the end game. His own marshals, his generals, they're exhausted. They see it's hopeless. They confront him.
And tell him he has to abdicate.
Yes, they basically refuse to fight anymore. The pressure is immense. In April 1814, the Emperor of the French, the man who dominated Europe, is forced to abdicate, to lay down his crown.
And as punishment, what do they do with him?
Surprisingly, it's relatively lenient, considering. They exile him, but not to prison. They send him to the island of Elba, off the coast of Italy.
Elba. Sounds small.
Tiny. He's allowed to keep the title of Emperor, rule over Elba's small population, have a small personal guard. But it's exile. The sources call it a cage of beauty and humiliation.
So the world breathes a sigh of relief. The Napoleonic Wars are over. The Bourbon monarchy is restored in France with Louis VIII. It's finished.
That's what everyone thought. The kings and diplomats gather in Vienna to redraw the map of Europe, assuming Napoleon is history. Big mistake.
They underestimated or forgot who they were dealing with.
They forgot the fire. They forgot the sheer audacity of the man. Exile for Napoleon wasn't retirement. The sources paint it as just a pause, a storm waiting to rise again.
Which leads to maybe the most dramatic chapter of all. The 100 Days, 1815.
Just when everyone thought it was safe, February 1815, Napoleon gives his guards the slip, gets on a small ship with about 1,000 loyal soldiers who went into exile with him,
And just sails back to France.
lands near Cannes on the French coast. An absolutely stunning, audacious gamble.
What happens when he lands? Doesn't the restored king send troops to arrest him?
Oh, immediately. King Louis VIII sends regiment after regiment south to stop him. The moment of truth comes near Grenoble at a place called Laffrey.
The royal army confronts Napoleon's small band.
Yes, muskets are leveled. It looks like civil war is about to erupt right there. And Napoleon does something incredible. Pure political theater, maximum risk.
What does he do?
He orders his own men not to fire. He walks forward, alone, towards the royal troop. He unbuttons his famous gray coat, exposes his chest, and shouts out that line.
The legendary one.
"Soldiers of the 5th Regiment, do you recognize me? If there is one among you who would kill his emperor, here I stand."
Unbelievable nerve. What happens?
Silence for a moment. Then a cry goes up from the rank. "Vive l'Empereur! Long live the Emperor!" The soldiers lower their muskets, break ranks, surge forward to cheer him. They refuse to fire on their old commander. The army sent to stop him joins him instead.
He won them over just like that, with words and charisma.
The power of his legend, the memory of the glory, it was irresistible. From that moment on, his march to Paris becomes a triumphal procession. More regiments defect, crowds cheer him. King Louis VIII flees. Napoleon walks back into the Tuileries Palace in Paris without a single shot being fired in anger against him.
He retook France with sheer personality.
It's one of the most astonishing comebacks in all of history.
And Europe, how do they react?
Absolute panic. Complete shock and horror. The diplomats in Vienna immediately stop arguing amongst themselves, declare Napoleon an outlaw, and pledge to raise massive armies to crush him again. They are not going to make the same mistake twice.
So the 100 days are numbered from the start, really. War is inevitable.
Totally inevitable. Napoleon knows it too. He tries to negotiate, but the Allies refuse. He has to gamble everything on one last military campaign.
Which brings us, finally, to Waterloo.
The final battlefield, June 18th, 1850, near the village of Waterloo in modern-day Belgium. Napoleon's last throw of the dice.
Against who?
Against 2 main Allied armies, an Anglo-Dutch-German army under the British Duke of Wellington, holding a strong defense, and a Prussian army under Marshal Blücher, marching hard to join Wellington.
So Napoleon has to beat Wellington before Blücher arrives.
That's the plan. Speed is crucial. He needs to smash Wellington quick. His tactical plan is actually pretty good, focused on breaking Wellington's center. But then fate, or maybe just bad luck, intervenes.
The weather.
Yeah, the weather plays a huge role. There was a massive thunderstorm the night before the battle. The ground turned into thick mud.
Why does that matter?
It matters because Napoleon's key weapon was his massed artillery bombardment. But the cannons literally sink into the soggy ground. They can't be easily moved or fired effectively. And crucially, Napoleon has to delay the start of his main attack for several hours on the morning of the 18th, waiting for the ground to dry out.
A critical delay.
Fatal. It gives Wellington more time to strengthen his defense, and, most importantly, it gives Blücher's Prussians those extra few hours they needed to reach the battlefield.
So even with the delay, Napoleon attacks.
He does. Fierce attacks throughout the day. The French cavalry charges Wellington's infantry squares time and again. The battle hangs in the balance for hours. It's incredibly close.
But the Prussians arrive.
Late in the afternoon, just as Napoleon is throwing his elite imperial guard into a final, desperate assault on Wellington's center, the Prussians start hitting his right flank in force.
That's the breaking point.
That's it. The French army, seeing Prussians arriving when they thought they were beating Wellington, finally break. Morale collapses. The retreat turns into a rout. It's over. The dream is...
This time, there's no escape. No second chance.
No mercy from the Allies this time. He abdicates again, tries to flee to America maybe, but eventually surrenders to the British Navy, hoping for asylum in Britain.
And the British response?
They don't let him land in England. They declare him a prisoner of war, or rather, a prisoner of the Allied powers, and decide he's simply too dangerous to keep anywhere near Europe.
So, no more Elba. Where do they send him?
To the most remote, desolate, godforsaken place they can find, the island of St. Helena.
St. Helena? Where even is that?
Tiny volcanic rock in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles from Africa, thousands of miles from South America, windswept, heavily guarded by British ships and soldiers, escape-proof.
The ultimate exile.
The final cage, and the sources paint a really poignant, melancholic picture of his last years there.
What was it like for him? The man who ruled an empire now stuck on a rock.
He ruled nothing, not even his own sketch, closely watched by his British governor, Hudson Lowe, whom he despised. He spent his days at Longwood House, damp and reportedly rat-infested.
A grim end.
Very. He walked the cliffs, apparently gazing out at the empty ocean, but he wasn't idle. His mind was still working.
He dictated his memoirs.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial for understanding his life. He spent hours dictating his life story, his campaigns, his political thoughts to his small group of loyal followers who went with him into exile.
So he's actively shaping how history will remember, even in exile.
Entirely. He's crafting the Napoleonic legend. He justifies his actions, blames others for his failures, Talleyrand, his marshals, the weather in Russia, traitors. He presents himself as this champion of the revolution, brought down by the jealousy of backward monarchs.
Creating the myth of the martyr emperor.
Exactly. It was a brilliant final campaign fought with words instead of cannons, and it worked. This narrative hugely influenced how people saw him for generations.
Do the sources mention any sort of human moments?
Yeah.
Any vulnerability?
They do suggest moments of reflection, of quiet sadness, whispering the names of people he'd loved, like Josephine or lost comrades, brief glimpses of the man behind the imperial mask.
And then death.
May 1821. He dies at the age of... The official cause was stomach cancer, which his father also died from. But of course, there have always been theories about it.
Always controversy with Napoleon.
Right to the very end. He's buried there on St. Helena, far from... Though his remains were eventually brought back to Paris in 1840 and interred in Les Invalides in a magnificent tomb.
But his story, his name, it didn't die with him.
Not at all. The sources make that clear. His name just echoes down, as they say, as a warning and as a wonder.
The man who reached for the world achieved more than anyone thought possible.
And in doing so, maybe lost himself in the process.
So we've covered the whole arc, that incredible strategic mind, the core system, the use of artillery, the psychological element.
Yeah, the sheer ambition that just didn't seem to have limits.
And the costs. The terrible cost. Divorcing Josephine for politics, the continental system backfiring, and of course the hundreds of thousands lost in Russia, over 500,000 men.
Devastating.
So the key takeaway for you, listening, is maybe this incredible dual nature of Napoleon.
Yeah, he was arguably the greatest military commander since the ancient world, maybe ever. Yet, you could argue his most lasting impact, the thing that still shapes lives today, wasn't a battle.
It was the Napoleonic Code, that legal framework.
Exactly. A law book, not a campaign plan. That's quite something.
He was this unique force in history, rose higher from obscurity than maybe anyone before him.
And fell harder. It's the ultimate story of genius mixed with hubris. He showed that merit and will could break the old system of privilege.
But he couldn't escape his own flaws. The ambition that drove him up also pulled him down.
It's the perfect, almost literary tragedy played out on a world stage. Revolutionary ambition fulfilled, and then ultimately self-destruct.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Something provocative to chew on based on the sources.
Right. There's this contrast. His rise was meteoric, dazzling, full of action and conquest, unbelievable success, but ultimately temporary power.
But then you have the end, St. Helena. Solitary, reflective. Yet that's where he dictates his memoirs, where he secures his legend, his place in history.
So the question for you is, which part of Napoleon's story really tells us more about the true nature of power? Is it the incredible, almost unbelievable acquisition of power, the battles, the strategies, the conquest?
Or is it the lonely, deliberate control of the narrative after, the way he shaped his own myth during that final exile? Which part holds the more lasting lesson?
Something to think about. Which Napoleon is more compelling, more enduring? The emperor on the battlefield or the prisoner crafting his legend on that remote island?